Alex will love hearing that. He'll watch this back and he'll take that. Welcome back for another episode of Fire Plus. Today we have a special guest with us and I'm really looking forward to all that she has to share this morning. And I want to introduce to you Lisa McINNES-SMITH, and she has so much wealth of wisdom and practical application, and we have not had her on a podcast yet. So welcome, Lisa, to Fire Plus.
Thanks, Jess. Excited to be here. Watch out for the fire.
And we were talking about before this, when we were just chatting before we started recording, this is our first double female podcast. So we haven't done that intentionally just for the sake of having two females speaking to each other. But I think it's pretty cool. And I think that you and I are just going to have so much to share with each other, but also to our listeners today. So I wanted to just introduce you to our listeners and to the people watching this morning. I know some will know you, some may have heard you speak before, maybe at church, maybe at some other things you've spoken at, business events, maybe online.
Yes.
But for those who don't know who you are, tell everyone, what do you do? How did you land in this position of being invited onto a podcast? Because we don't just invite any old person off the street. So
oh, you don't?
We don't. Although if we're getting desperate, we might. But we're not desperate.
There are so many interesting people in the world. Well, I meet them every single day. You're never going to run out of people.
True. So tell us who you are.
All right.
What do you do?
Okay. So background in sports psychology. Went on to become a motivational speaker. In other words, what is that? So somebody that speaks about a topic. So my topic is high performance. How do you become a high performer? How do you lead high performers? And how do you create a high performing team? So think sport. So come from a family of professional tennis players. First book catapulted me into the limelight. Wrote a book called Why Wasn't I Told? Not to be confused with Where Do You Come From?
Two really different books.
Topics,
there.
yeah. But it's given me just wide exposure to the corporate workspace. The education department wanted me to speak to teachers, to young people, to principals. The business world wanted me to speak because it's all about goal setting and problem solving. Sort of the same process used in two different ways. So that's put my career onto this pathway of a stage of travelling around Australia, and then the next thing I knew, I was travelling around the world. So the gift of being on stage and presenting, 45 minutes to an hour, it's really not very long, and to be flown to the other side of the world, I had to learn, how do you actually get a key message across that's really succinct and pertinent, and at the same time, if you want to get paid, it's got to be funny and entertaining. So I was on a very sharp learning curve, and I do have the most fortunate doors that have opened to me. Massive arenas, 20 and 30,000 people at a time, speaking alongside American presidents and rock stars and famous preachers, and I'm blown away myself as to the places and politicians, the places I've landed, that you can almost hear the audience go, Lisa, who? Because everybody else is known except me. I'm not a celebrity of any kind. I'm simply an expert in my field that I believe God has elevated and given me a voice.
Amazing. And how incredible that we get to have you on one of our episodes. This is a fairly new podcast still, and you've spoken all around the world to large audiences, and you're also willing to speak to small audiences as well, which I love the humility and the willingness in that. So you basically speak for a living.
That's right. I've got every girl's favourite job. I get paid to talk.
Awesome. How did it start? When did you know that this was going to be what you do for a career? This is what your life's work is speaking.
Wow.
And how did it all begin?
Look, my life turned very quickly. I was a sports psychologist. I was a physical education teacher. I was working with kids across a whole range, from children with disability, blind children, people in wheelchairs, and then really high-performing sports people. So I had a great experience of the range of ability of human beings, which I feel like God set me up to. I needed to know, this full range of capability to see that we can move places we never dreamt we could if we listen to the right people. And I mean, definitely God was the major catapulter for me, because at the time I was promotions manager of a nightclub. I'd sort of taken a little detour, and I guess I was just trying stuff. And I encountered God in a very real way that I had never done before, age 26, which just basically refocused me, instead of on myself and the stuff of life, the party scene. I was suddenly focused on how I could help others. I feel like I got a directive, focus on someone you can help. And that has pretty much shaped the rest of my life. And I thought, well, who can I help at 26? I thought I can help teenagers because they're younger than me. Surely I know something more. And I'm a sports psychologist. I've got cred. But it just focused me to do something to really serve an age bracket. So I was thinking 16 to 26, like that age bracket. My books took off. My speeches took off. The school started to invite me not just to speak to a class, but speak to the whole school. So I had to learn really quickly, how do you engage a whole big group of kids that are noisy and rowdy, and how do you keep their attention and give them something of value?
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because I was thinking about you. I've heard you speak before. I've had the privilege of hearing you speak in a couple of different settings. Particularly, you've preached at Fire Church before. You've actually preached Sunday sermons before. And I know that, and this is the feedback that it's been a night for me personally, I've noticed that you are very able and very good at engaging a crowd of all sorts. So kids, teenagers, adults, married people, single people, male, female, people who are professionals, people who are still trying to work out their thing, seasoned Christians, new Christians, unbelievers. I've really noticed that you have the knack of being able to speak to a full crowd and keep them all listening. And that's a skill that it doesn't just come along, and sure, we can all work on that. But I think you've definitely gifted, and it's something that, as you've acknowledged, it's a God-given gift.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because in the church setting, and sometimes we hear testimonies of, preachers or different leaders saying they never thought they would speak, or they had a fear of public speaking, or why God used me, this little person. Yeah. I think, and they are wonderful stories, seeing the people who never thought they would use their voice, and God suddenly uses their voice. But for you, Lisa, you've got this talent, you've got this gift, and it sounded like it was from an early age. You're intelligent. It doesn't just come along that you get a psychology degree. So you've got gifts and talents, and then you met the Lord.
Yes.
And God started using or directing you to use those talents for Him and to help people, as opposed to just helping yourself.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting too that, one person's voice can activate many others to use their voice and to say something worthwhile. And I think, with all the noise of the world, particularly the online world, now anyone can really say anything to anyone at any time.
Yep.
Tell me, what have you noticed now that it's easy for people to have a platform, to have a voice, to use words? What have you noticed, particularly as a speaker in the field of, trying to have something worthwhile to say? What have you noticed in that arena, and how people choose to use their words and where it's landing?
All right. Let me just go back because, I was a phys ed teacher. I had a voice. What did I have a voice? I had a voice at the swimming carnival, on the microphone, on the athletics track, screaming at that girl over there, put the javelin down. Like, she's 300 metres away. And I look back and realised that I actually knew how to bring order and control with hundreds of kids, understanding the importance of using your voice when you really need to, but not filling all the spaces. So I look back because when I was a phys ed teacher, I was working with 59 different nationalities, teaching girls who had no exposure to sport or physical activity in many cases to try things. So I just want to look back and go, that was my beginning, and it's like God didn't waste anything. It's almost like he put tools in my toolkit while I was growing, not knowing where it was going to be utilised. I had no idea what was coming. And I would have said I'm a confident speaker until I got in front of a business crowd. Because I was sent to America to look for speakers to bring to Australia. I worked for a promoter. And, I stood up in front of 500 professional speakers. I was so terrified I burst into tears. So I needed that was a little reality check. Oh, you might be confident in one place, but not another. So I had to learn how to use my voice where and when. So that was just sort of background information, because now that I'm got an opportunity to speak anywhere in the world, and interesting over COVID, I'm doing podcasts and filming into speaking bureaus in every country in the world, into corporate clients right across the Pacific. Like literally in COVID, we spoke to more people in more countries all at the one time than I'd done earlier in my career. Otherwise, I was present. I was either in the UK, in Israel, in London, in Russia, in Singapore. But now suddenly I'm in all these countries. So out of tough times comes an interesting paradigm shift of, well, what are we capable of? So voice, what have I learned? I've learned that what one person says really matters. Like you can bring peace, you can calm a situation down, or you can incite anger. And it's interesting, we're seeing that in the world right now, how people use their voice to either bring people to unite and connect, or whether they use their voice to arouse personal right and entitlement and force an agenda. And this has been really interesting as a presenter to recognise the responsibility that you and I have, and all of us in community. Which conversation do you add to? Do you add to the peace-bringing conversation, or the unifying conversation, or the division conversation? Because you can do it whether you talk politics, health, COVID, war, like pick a topic. Most of us have a side. It's not what we think, often it's how we say it. So I want to tell you, words can make you or break you.
Absolutely. And I think you just reminded me so often the Lord will say, speak up. Yeah. And yet almost equally amount of times the Lord will say, be quiet now.
Yes.
That's in my experience anyway.
Mine too.
And it's a learning curve. And I think, it's important at times when there's something to say. And like you said, it's not just what you say, it's also how you say it and who are you saying it to.
Yes. And sometimes I've got to say my husband is the one that's telling me to zip it. And I love the fact that if I'm not listening to God, at least I've got my husband. Because seriously, we need each other sometimes to know when to speak up. Like you need someone cheering you on a bit and helping you to be brave. Like when we're not isolated, we're not living in a little world of it's about me. Because if I'm speaking on behalf of. And when I need to listen and be quiet, it's also a message to others too. To come on, let's all listen. Let's let each person have their say. This is a practice. Jess, most of us need to practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Bible says there's power of life and death in the tongue, in what we say, in how we communicate to each other. And that's certainly on a one-on-one level, but also in a family context, in a workspace.
Yes.
And in your case, in a large crowd, there's power in that.
Yeah.
And it's going to be power for good or power in the opposite direction.
That's right. I think talk bridges. Always think when you're your words, are you building a bridge or are you building a barrier? It helps me. It's like, think about it as you're projecting. Am I trying to get people to be able to talk to one another, or am I shutting the conversation down? And publicly or privately. You know, I always used to say to my husband, if we both want to be right, we're probably going to be right out of this marriage.
Oh, yeah, it's so interesting,
Like,
isn't
lay
it?
it down sometimes and go, give the other person.
Yeah.
Let them be right today, even if you
Yes.
think you're right. Like, compromise is important.
Yes, it's so true. And I think, you know, once we think about our words, our voice, what I need to say, but you put that in the context of a relationship and not just a marriage relationship, but just relationships in general, being human beings in community in some way, then we actually have to think about that a little more than what we would when we're just a person thinking about ourselves. We have to actually think about, what am I communicating and why? And what outcome am I trying to get to? So I wanted to ask you, Lisa, because you're an expert in this field of communication, of having something meaningful to say, but also activating your audience into how they can do the same. I wanted to just get some of the gold from you. And for those who are listening and watching as well, maybe after watching this episode, they have something to take away from, you know, why does my voice matter? And also the words that we choose to use, the context of how we choose to use them. Tell me, what would you say are the most important things for a communicator?
Well, firstly, I think that we need to know how to diffuse anger. I think we need to recover. Like, let's just talk sport for a moment. High-performing sports people do not excel if they don't know how to pick themselves back up after they've made a mistake. So the speed of their recovery is the speed of their ability to perform well. Think about it in a relationship.
I was going to say, the sport thing, I'm nodding along and I'm like, it's all going over my head. I have no understanding of the sport, particularly professional sport world. So, but I do understand marriage.
That's right.
Tell me more.
So here we go. We've got this ability to be the conflict reducer or increaser. And so one thing I learned straight away, if you want to try and help people recover, like, you know, bring it back to a sane conversation, speak lower and slower. So practical. Speak lower and slower, Jess. And just by me dropping down a little bit and slowing my voice down, we tend to match each other in pace. So if you get with a group of women and they're all talking like this and they're all buzzing and they're all jumping over each other, then no bloke is going to get into that conversation, you know, until he comes in at the same pace, which don't usually do. So sometimes we have to slow down. So I'll say to women in business sometimes, stop, speak lower, speak slower, and speak at the pace of the people around you. And particularly if they're men at a boardroom, I'm in boards, sometimes just match the pace so that everyone can hear each other. And we're not doing it to be like each other. We're doing it respectfully, trying to find a pace that works for everybody. So one is conflict resolution, lower and slower, or just the real speed to be able to go, oh, I'm sorry, let me try that again. Like, you know, you've just said something, but it wasn't really that helpful. Might have been a bit brusque, a bit inappropriate. The language wasn't really, you know, helping. Just quickly recover. Sorry, let me just try that again. We can do that with our kids. We're angry and they go, sorry, let me just rephrase that. Oh my goodness, anyone will forgive us if we'll be quick to pick ourselves up rather than me waiting for you to correct me, which I'm not going to like anyway. Like self-correction.
Absolutely. And that self-awareness, even in the context of heat, emotion, and I think the power of the reset. I know I'm a wife, so I'm listening to you and you're talking about, the marriage context, but also a mum, and I love being a mum, and I've got 3 amazing kids. And I lose it sometimes.
Yes.
And then I suddenly become
you're human.
I am human, and I become so aware of what my voice can do to either escalate a situation. You know, two of my kids might be having a bicker about something, and it presses my buttons, and I add to it. I'm adding fuel rather than trying to defuse.
Yes.
But the power of the reset, if I can stop and go, I can see in my mind, I'm adding to this. This is not helping. Now I've got kids crying, and everyone's wanting to just run away.
Yeah.
You can actually stop in the middle of that and go, you know what?
Yeah.
Let's try something different. And often it's our voice that has to be the starting component of that.
Correct.
I have to actually change with my voice and setting a new tone. And it might also involve, sitting down instead of standing up, because the standing can be, looking down and intimidating, and that's not going to diffuse a situation that needs diffusing and needs some peace.
Yeah. And coming alongside and just even saying the
Absolutely.
simple line of, hey, what can we do together?
Yeah.
Like just that.
Yeah.
I wonder what we could try. You're not even telling the other one what to do. You're just showing that it's we, not us, antagonistic one at the other.
Yeah.
I mean, even my husband and I have to remember when we strongly disagree about things that he is not the enemy.
Yeah.
He's on my side.
Yeah.
But sometimes we even do that. We go, right, sorry, you're not the enemy. I'm going to calm down. We both want the best.
Yeah.
We just think differently about how to get there. But just even to say that, oh my goodness, that diffuses just the angst. And some people need to take time out. So I really want to say to everybody, if you're getting real hot under the collar, you're out of control, just say, time out, give me 30 minutes. 30 minutes is usually enough time to be able to go, you haven't run from the conversation altogether. You just know that you need to bring yourself back. You need to self-reflect. You need to calm down, deep breathe, walk outside, and then come back. And can I say that even people in business meetings should know there is a time sometimes to stop. Go, excuse me, I need to just take a time out. Do you mind if we all take time out? Rejoin in 30 minutes and we'll come back with what's our best idea we can bring in. Pattern interrupt.
Yeah.
Especially when things are going awry and it doesn't feel right. And no one intended it to get angry, but someone's got angry, so it triggers the next one. Hey, we all want to be heard, because if you're not heard, you're not valued. You don't feel like you're valued. So we've got to practice both. How do we get heard, but how do we help others to be heard?
Absolutely. You just reminded me of when you said, we all need to be heard, and that's actually how we find our value.
Yeah.
And as Christians, we know that our identity, our value is actually in how the Lord sees us.
Yes.
But as human beings, and God understands this, He put us in relationship.
Yes.
He didn't put us all on our own island,
Yeah.
although sometimes I dream of that, of just being in my own little oasis somewhere. But God didn't design us to be like that. He's designed us to all be together. There's billions of people on planet Earth, and we're still here. We're still rotating.
Yes.
And, I think about those who, need just the time out, and those who are trying to work out, well, how am I going to articulate what I need to say, but who's hearing me?
Yes.
Who's hearing me? And sometimes we feel like people don't understand us. Sometimes we feel like people don't care about what we're saying. But I had a grade 6 teacher. I know you're a qualified teacher. You're not teaching anymore. But I had a teacher, my final year of primary school, who she did hear me. She had this incredible ability to find a way to get to know all of her students, 25 of us or whatever it was, and to get to know each of us. And despite the fact that the Lord uses me now to speak in different contexts, and I'm one of those people, as I mentioned earlier, that I didn't think that would be the trajectory of my life. I started life as very timid, very quiet, only spoke to answer a question, really. Wow. And I had this teacher at, 11 years old, 12 years old, who found a way to get me to speak up, but also found a way to show me my value by being heard. And there's such power in that. And, for all of my teachers of primary, high school, and even university, she's the one I remember.
Yes.
I don't remember what she taught me. I don't remember what units of maths we had and all of that, all the stories we read, to be honest. But I remember
how she made you feel.
Absolutely. And so I think about that as a pastor. I think about that as somebody who, gets to speak to people and hopefully add something and give them takeaways, but also somebody who gets to listen to people.
Yes.
Lisa, how do we listen to people well? How do we do that? How do we do that by stopping speaking and actually showing someone value?
Yes.
What's the formula to get that right?
Well, I do think that asking questions is one of our keys. And just for all those people that are timid to even start a conversation, always be ready with 3 questions. Not 1, but 3. So get in the habit of finding 3 questions that you can ask people that show that you're interested in hearing about their life. So we try not to always say, what do you do for $1? Which you could. But you might say something like, what makes you really passionate about life? Or what's something that you really love to do in your spare time? Or which group of people do you really love to help when you have time? So we're just trying to just find where people's interests are. And when you have 3 questions and firstly, if you ask questions, you've got to listen to the answer before you jump in with your next question. So I've got to tell you, you've got to warn everybody. The minute you ask a question, guess what? You're ready with an answer for them.
Yeah, and sometimes we put it back on ourselves. We go, oh yeah, and that's the time when I did, and we're so good at making things about ourselves.
Yes,
like just people in general.
That's right. And when other people are talking, we're already forming in our head the part we're going to bring. So it's just slowing that down a little bit. So listening is asking questions, and I'm going to say this: smile and nod. Smile and nod, practice it, because people know if you're smiling or you just give a little curve on the lips.
Like I'm doing right now?
Yeah, like you're doing to me. You do it automatically. We do it with our kids. We listen, but sometimes we forget to do it with others.
Yeah.
So really important in the workplace to do that as well. And it's a little practiced thing. And interesting, I was speaking this week to a group of 140 hotel managers. So they manage big properties, big staff, big teams. And we were sharing ideas on how do you keep good people. And the research shows that you help people make a friend. Like, imagine if you're doing a job that's a bit mundane, a bit repetitive. The job might not be fascinating, but the people could be. And when you have one friend that's interested in you, that asks you questions and that you're sharing, you're far more likely to stay in that job. So that's an exchange. It's a conversation. And all we need to do is try our questions with different people and just find people that resonate. So as a leader, let's say we're talking to leaders out there, if you're leading, even the way you run your meeting, it's always good to have somebody share something personally about their life so we can get to know each other, even if it's one each meeting.
Yeah.
So the invitation to get people to share things about their life that matter to them, and that helps the rest of us understand what value they place on it.
Absolutely. And then they also look forward to the next interaction.
Yes.
Like that's what we're going for. We don't want people, any of us, we don't want people to think, oh, here we go, this lady's coming along now and, oh, what's she going to say now? Or, I've got to think of something to say because she's going to ask me another question.
Yes.
That's not what we're going for.
No.
And we want authenticity, and I think particularly in a world where, people are starting to really look at that. What's real, what's not. The young people, that's what they're looking for.
Yes.
And so we need to have that in our relationship, and we need to present that, you know, and even though it's intentional, as you said, I think that's so good. Like, have questions ready. Be thinking about how you're going to speak to someone and what you might ask, and how you're not going to make it about yourself.
Yeah.
And how you are going to purposefully listen.
Yes.
But,
And just so you don't get general answers like, you know, how you going?
Yes.
And so people automatically go, yeah, fine. So let's say people come into church. You have a choice of the quality of conversation you want to initiate, and it all starts with the type of questions that you ask them. You might ask them specifically, you know, you come into, you know, it's a more family environment, caring, you know. Did you have any major crises this week? And they have a chuckle. Well, not a crisis, but. And then you've already opened the door for them to be able to say, actually, I've had a really tough week.
Yeah.
Which I think in church life, we want a different quality of conversation. We want this open, authentic. We want people to be able to just listen to one another, pray with one another. I mean, I've got to tell you, you know, I'm a successful businesswoman. But when I come into my church world where people, I don't want them to talk to me like a businesswoman. I want them to talk to me like the girl that I am and can say, you know, how's your week been? Any crises? And I might have a little laugh because my crisis is different to theirs. But sometimes when they just say to me, hey, I just want to pray for you, that you just get a real sense of clarity on that. And oh my goodness, if it's a younger person who does it for me, I'm like, oh, that's like I'm touched. If it's an older person that I'm touched, I just feel like that care factor that comes with starting the conversation with something that matters. Like, let's get past the chit-chat.
The surface level.
Fast if we can.
Yep.
Not always, because sometimes it's the stepping stone into the next conversation.
Yeah. So we don't necessarily want to throw people into the deep end and force deep.
No, you can't
quickly.
Force deep.
You can't.
No.
And it's unfair. And I think it does require rapport and a level of trust. But what you're saying is it's an invitation and allowing things to go more than, you know, where are you going for lunch after church? Or, you know, oh, yeah, nice to meet you. How's you, you know, how's this and that? And, you know, I know in our church, we're great at saying, say hi to, you know, 3 people around you and in that short little window of time. And there's nothing wrong with that. No. It's nice to have those friendly, positive interactions. But certainly that's not what we don't want it to end there. No. You know, we want real relationship. We want the ability in a church setting, absolutely, to it genuinely to feel like family. Yes. Doesn't happen instantly. Yeah. But words and conversations are the stepping stones to that.
Yes. And we've got to be looking at the fact we've got to recognise that there's 3 conversations going on most of the time. There's the conversation that you have with yourself. And in fact, we're having a conversation with ourselves all the time, Jess. Did you know that?
It actually drives me nuts. Sometimes I wish I could turn it off, you know, the things going around in my head.
Yeah. So that conversation, we need some training on that. And I mean, as a sports psychologist, we work with that voice a lot. What are you saying to yourself, about yourself, when nobody else is impacted? So what do you say to yourself when you're under pressure? What do you say to yourself when you're feeling uncomfortable? What do you say to yourself when you're feeling like you're insignificant? Like, these are really important because these all are common to the human experience. So that's something that I love to train people. You actually have to plan. This is not just accidental because like a high performer, you've got to learn what type of words. Now, I've learnt now, which I didn't know when I was studying sports psych, that I can speak the words that God says about me over me. So, for example, you know, I'm feeling weak or I'm feeling tired and I just say to myself, yeah, but God says I'm more than a conqueror and I'm above the situation if I want to be. You know, and he wants to give me the desires of my heart. And he truly cares intimately and deeply about the stuff that matters to me. So notice what happens. Even as I say it now, I can feel it.
Yeah.
I just slow it down and I remind myself of what God has to say about me in the middle of my mess, usually that I've created with my words. So the conversation you have with yourself is something we need to practice. But of course, there's the conversation we have with others, which is often the overflow of what you say to yourself. You know, you sort of beat yourself up. You are quite likely to be quite sharp and tough on others.
Yeah.
Interesting. And of course, the third conversation is the one we have with God, which also can be an ongoing running conversation or nothing. You know, I think about my own dad who just had no God connection for most of his life. And he seemed to read all the stuff that was against, like, you know, it was sort of trying to prove to himself that he didn't have a God conversation, so there wasn't one to be had. But he's watching all his kids plus his wife have these conversations that were transforming us into better people. And I remember my dad saying, he says, I want what you've got. I said, well, you've got to do different things than what you're doing right now. Because my dad's an awesome tennis player. So he knew exactly all about good practices for tennis. But he didn't know good practices to connect with his maker. And he went, oh, I hadn't thought of it like that. And I said, so Dad, we start a different conversation. And, hey, you talk to people who know how to do this and you learn skills just like you teach everyone how to play tennis and how to talk to yourself in the middle of a high-pressure match. So, you know, that exchange, how powerful is this?
Yeah.
Learning what do we need, and that the three conversations are pretty much happening all the time, and which area do we need to grow in the most?
Yeah, and one can't really be separated from the other. We know that God is omnipresent. He is waiting for us to speak to him.
Yep.
I literally describe that to our children, Alex and I, and also the children that we're ministering to, because often it's young people. Sometimes it's adults who are learning how to pray and what a relationship with the Lord means. But often it's children. You're sort of going, okay, how am I laying the foundation here?
Yes.
And I'll say, you know, God is just waiting for us to speak to him.
Yeah.
So that we, you know, to try and bring this concept of prayer off this holy pedestal into just it's an interaction that he's waiting for. Do you want to have that interaction too?
And I demonstrate it, Jess. That's what I do. The first thing with the people in my world, because, you know, I work in a secular world.
Yeah.
So I want them to taste what it feels like. So I'm quick to say, I'm just going to say a prayer for you, but I'm saying it out loud so you can hear what I'm thinking and saying, what I'm projecting towards you. They're like, oh, okay. And so, you know, I might be looking straight at them because they're not used to bowing their head or closing their eyes. But I'd naturally do that if I was talking to God. I sort of go, you know, like quiet myself. But many people that have no God conversations, I just look straight at them and just go, okay, here we go. And can I use an example?
Yeah,
you know?
please.
Jess, I'm just asking today that God helps you have clear thinking about what you need to do today, and that you would have a gentleness in your spirit with how you approach this problem that you're going to at work, and that you would just be able to feel the peace of God protecting you as you walk into this tricky situation.
Amazing. I already feel better about the rest of my day.
And that's what they say to me. Last night, I was doing exactly that.
Yeah.
I prayed for a woman who had some challenges, and I prayed for a young man and he just went, how did you know that about me? I said, well, I didn't, but that's what happens when you talk to God and try and pray over someone else, the words come. So also giving them a little taste of that supernatural intervention, that divine encounter.
Yeah, the unexplainable.
That's right.
Yeah.
Taste and see.
Yeah, so good, so good. And I think what I love, that what I'm getting from what you're saying, and hopefully the listeners are too, is it's the modeling, but also teaching people how to practice it, how to speak. Like you said earlier, like slow down, lower your tone. These are all really practical applications, but also giving that practical application to the spiritual conversation that I think every Christian wants to have.
Yes.
It's a desire within our very spirit and our soul, but sometimes it's that human or physical limitation of, I don't know what to say. Yeah. I don't know how I'm going to find time to say it. I desire my spiritual relationship to be quiet and in a certain setting and at the same time every day. And there's nothing wrong with any of those. If you can have a routine like that, amazing. If you've got a special place, or if you've got it, awesome. But if somebody can't make all of those things align, particularly those with kids or those who are, you're just hungry to have some time with the Lord and to speak to him and maybe to hear from him as well.
Yeah.
But how do I do that, Lisa, as a Christian, but also as an amazing communicator?
Yeah.
What would you say how does someone start? Where do they start with their conversation with the Lord? Is there a starting place? What does that look like?
Well, I'm just going to give you a couple of my practices. Yeah. So I have a chair in my home. When I sit in that chair, I always ask God, I'm here, God. Talk to me as I'm doing this. So I might be reading a Bible, or I might be reading another book, I might be reading work. But I intentionally ask him, guide me, talk to me. Give me an idea. Because I'm in an ideas business. And I don't know if you know this, Jess, but every book that I wrote that was successful was a God idea. And every book that I wrote that was my idea was a flop. I'm like, come on. But there's that, you know when you're getting a nudge towards something. And sometimes it's sort of a bit uncomfortable because it's out of your zone, out of your comfort zone. But a couple of things I do. One is I have a chair to just remind myself, go sit in that chair, because I'm in my head. When you're in your head and it's like a fishbowl up there and everything's running around. When I was with little kids, and now I've got grandkids, and there's a lot of noise in the back seat, then I start singing really loud and I sing God songs and they laugh. They laugh. And I laugh at myself, bring the tension down. But I remember, when I had babies screaming, I had kids close together and I would march around the house. God's on my side. And I'd be singing songs. And the kids are looking at me like she's got a bit crazy. But I was trying to talk myself into a bit of sanity and peace. And I could feel myself losing the plot, and I'm bringing it back by consciously practicing singing things that calm me down. And of course now I do it in different ways. My mother is elderly and in pain. I can sing with my mum. I can sing words of life, some beautiful song that I've learnt at church, and my mum I can just almost feel the peace of God come in. So singing is really important. Yeah. So
even if you can't sing, right?
To those
who are listening, it
I'm
actually doesn't matter.
I'm no singing star. I've got a limited number of notes that I reach.
But God loves those notes that you're singing, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think that I get it. There is something about singing. Yeah. And when I'm really under pressure and I'm feeling like my life's, I'm losing control, and it's more than singing. I mean, we call it worship God. It's like I close my eyes and I just tell him, you're amazing and your world that you've made is amazing and my body is amazing and my health is amazing. I literally worship God by going through the things that I'm grateful for. We all know gratefulness practice is big in the psychology world. Yeah. But God was telling us about that 5,000 years ago. Give thanks in all situations. So that's a practice. Yeah. Isn't it? You and I practice it.
Absolutely.
But you, the minute you stop practicing it, you lose it. So this isn't something like, oh, well, I said thank you last week. No, you do it again today. And I run down a list, but I say it out loud. Do you know why? So my ears get to hear it. I need to hear what I'm grateful for. And it brings me down, brings the peace back. And then I can think again about, all right, what can I do? Tricky situation or tricky season. We've all got challenges. You know, people that are older than us, people younger, businesses that aren't producing, staff that aren't producing. Like, we're all dealing with conflict in there somewhere. And oh my goodness, when you still your own heart and go soft, how different it projects to others.
Yeah, so good. And I think, you know, what you were describing, there's application in all seasons of life. I think as a pastor, but take that away. I'm a person that's, you know, navigating a relationship with the Lord and trying to get it right.
That's right.
That's what we're trying to do
Today.
That's right.
Forget about yesterday. Just today.
Yeah. And I think the reality is that I want to make decisions every day that are stepping in the right direction.
Yeah.
That I'm not waiting for everything to be just right and then I can sit in that. No. Because I've learned, and I'm probably still learning and going to relearn it, that is not actually going to happen. I've had incredible highs.
Yeah.
I've had difficult lows,
yes.
and I'm sure both of those and everything in between are still coming in the years that I'm going to be journeying on this earth. And I think when we're waiting for things to be a certain way, and then I will do this, and then I will be able to talk about that, and then I will be, it's just not going to happen, right?
No.
And I think what you were describing, we can all do that. If we have a mouth that works, then I can declare. I can speak to the Lord.
Yes.
I can actually complain to him. I was speaking to my kids about this. Sounds so odd, but we were reading some chapters in Habakkuk, and I was telling my kids that, you know, Habakkuk was complaining to the Lord. Do you think it's okay to complain to him? Like, he was complaining out loud, and they're like, oh no, it doesn't sound like what we should do. And I said, well, have a listen to this, because Habakkuk says this, but then God replied. Yeah. The Lord actually replied, and he didn't reply with, how dare you complain. He replied as a father having a conversation with his son. And I think about that as a daughter of the Lord, as, you know, someone with responsibility and trying to get things right, and trying to have good, positive conversations with other people, and trying to teach people and lead people. But take all of that away, I'm trying to have conversations with my maker, with my Father, and life-giving. And so, you know, I've learnt that don't wait for it. No. Don't wait for things to be right. Don't wait to have the right words. Just start speaking. And I think I absolutely love those practical things that you described. You've got a chair, but also when all the chaos is happening, you just start speaking. You start declaring, even if
driving, shower.
Yes, the shower. The shower is an amazing time. I know that's my little, no one else is in here.
That's right.
Just you and me, God.
My space. And can I say that when we're trying to infuse what we've got, like, this is how I see faith. God has shown me that I'm precious and that he's got things for me to do. I mean, that's a pretty cool relationship. He's made me feel valuable. And I didn't get that until I was in my 20s. And so it's not strange that I would want to share that. Like, I want people to taste what I've got. It's like, you know, when you find a great deal, you got to go and have a look at this. I feel like I've got this great deal and I want to share. So that's pretty natural for me. And I noticed when I very first got a connection to God and really stepped in and said, I'm going to trust him, I started sharing with everybody. And then I realised not everybody does that. I'm like, what's holding them back? So I think sometimes you need to go back and refresh yourself with what you got. And so this is a problem if you've taken for granted that you've walked with God a long time. So I coach people. I'm a business coach, and like I call it really a personal coach where we're talking about their personal life and their business life and how does it mix. And I say you can't be coached by me unless I can give you a blessing at the end of every session. They're like, oh, sounds okay.
Sounds like a good deal.
Yep. And so the end of the session comes, and it could be online, it could be in person. I say, all right, close your eyes. Don't look at me. I'm just going to speak a blessing over you. And then I speak out whatever I've got. And usually it's to do with some of their problems. So, we've been coaching, so we've been hearing their challenges. And then I'm speaking, well, I just speak a blessing over John, and I speak a blessing over his marriage. And I speak this real sense of closeness between them. And I speak a blessing over his children, that those children are going to find common ground where they're really actually going to be able to get along. And I speak a blessing over his business where he's going to find new clients. Like just this. So I'm just sort of projecting forward what I would want for him. And at the end of it, they nearly always say to me, "Oh, do that thing again." Like, do that. And what am I doing? I'm bringing my words and all my faith that God is good, and I'm projecting it towards them so that they might have a good gift as well in words. And I watch people literally receive it and just feel the peace, feel the hope, feel encouraged. And then as soon as I come back to the next coaching session, they say, "Don't forget the blessing." And so this is a really good tool for all of us, that we can do this. We can bless one another. Speak words that bring hope, courage, encouragement, life, forgiveness, connection. I mean, the forgiveness is a big one, isn't it? It's like just saying that, "I'm sorry, I was wrong. Would you please forgive me?" Oh, my goodness. Just teaching people to say that phrase.
Yeah.
I teach them in business. They're like, "Oh, no, I'm not saying it." Like, yeah, everybody say it out loud. Go on, Jess. Say, "I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was wrong.
I was wrong.
Will you please forgive me?"
Will you please forgive me?
It's really hard not to say, yeah.
Alex will love hearing that. He'll watch us back and he'll take that. My husband, Alex.
Yes. And I'm going to say everybody loves to hear it.
Yeah.
Because it just softens whatever the situation is. And again, if there's a line, you learn it, you practice it with yourself, and then you try it on people. Because it doesn't just come to you at the moment.
Yes.
The words we need when we're under pressure are not there.
We always think of it later, don't we?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lisa, so good. And I think, again, we can all do this, but it's a practice. It's something we've got to begin with, and we go, you know what? Yeah. I want to speak life into someone. I want to encourage someone today. Yeah. Maybe it's a family member. Maybe it's someone at the shops. It doesn't have to be this grand gesture. No. Don't wait for it. And I think that's certainly what I'm getting out of our conversation today. Yes. I think there might be some listeners and some watchers today who would love a blessing. Do you think we could do that?
Yeah.
Can I ask you to do that
Sure.
for those who might be watching today as we finish up?
Okay. Should I speak to you or should I speak there?
Let's speak to the camera.
Okay. All right. So, I bless you with the goodness of God. I bless you with his favour. I bless you with divine health and for the healing power of God to flow through your body and your mind and your circumstances. I bless you with a wholeness that God would love to make you whole and healthy and strong so that you might be able to take all that you are receiving right now and be able to pass it on. And I just give this freely to you because it's been freely given to me. And I share the love of God with you. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom and your practical application. And I look forward to our next conversation, Lisa. Thank you.
It's lovely to be with you, Jess. Bye, everybody.
See you, everyone.